Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jesse. And as you heard, we are going to be recording a part of our session today. So just the introductory portion where I'll be sharing a few things around the Our Common Agenda report and the Transforming Education Summit, and where Jesse will be talking about the SG's vision statement on education, as well as examples on pedagogy such as project-based learning. So just that portion will be recorded. And then when we go into our breakout rooms and we come back and we reflect and we share some of the concrete steps that we'll be taking when we go back home, that part will not be recorded. Just to share a bit more, just kind of the flow, maybe just to review as people are coming in. Again, we'll be having an introductory where we talk about some of the major processes that are happening here at the UN, such as the OCA process, the Our Common Agenda process, maybe a reading of the educational process in general. I'll be providing a bit of that information, and then Jesse will go through a presentation, and then we'll go into breakout rooms. So I'll just jump right ahead and go into it. As you're attending the CSW, you may have been hearing references to the Our Common Agenda report. And this is a report that was commissioned by member states on the occasion of the 75th anniversary of the UN, where member states asked the Secretary General to really think about how can, as an international system, how can we rejuvenate the multilateral system overall? So this report came out in 2021, and there are multiple tracks of the report. And two of them are on how do we transform education, and the other one is on the Global Digital Compact, which again are some things that you may hear throughout this commission because of the priority theme being on innovation and on digital tools. So in light of the Transforming Education Summit, which was one of the very first recommendations of the Secretary General to be actioned, this summit took place in September of 2022. So since that summit, conversations have really been building up, not only on what makes a good education, but what is education for, and how do we evolve from educational models that prevail today to those that are really going to meet the needs of current and future generations. So depending on where you're located, I think a general statement can be made that really the quality or the value of education is often judged on metrics like employment rate, like what kind of education leads to a good job, GDP percentage dedicated to funding education, and really the percentage of people who count formal education as key to attaining employment. Yet, when we really think about it, educational systems focus primarily on producing labor-ready workers have proven largely incapable of addressing the ills and challenges most troubling our societies today. We see that really our educational systems are not meeting the needs of students, and really are not providing the type of education that parents want for their kids, or even those who are in higher ed. It would seem that the educational systems that we have today are not meeting the needs of all individuals. So maybe I could just reflect a little bit on what should our educational systems be seeking to do? And maybe they should be seeking to release the intellectual and the moral capacity of students to focus on very different kind of aims and objectives. And the societies that we yearn to create today are not just going to happen as a consequence of having access to material resources. Because if this were the case, the world's wealthiest nations would be paragons of equality, justice, sustainability, and social cohesion. And we see that just mere access to material means does not necessarily equal societal societies that are more just or equal. So in this connection, a few elements should be taken into consideration when thinking about the design of fitting educational systems. So one element can be how can educational systems train individuals to identify, address, and eliminate root causes of inequality. Another can be how to recognize and overcome injustice. And another could be how can we build societies that foster compassion, kindness, and respect in addition to what is already being taught in schools. So really maybe a central purpose of education can be to release the capacities of each individual to contribute to the flourishing of communities, not simply to churn out workers. And so in this connection, we see that really the role of teachers is going to change radically in the coming decades. And significant attention needs to be paid to retaining teachers and attracting new individuals to the field. And really, education should be preparing students for more cooperative governance structures, because we're so interdependent. We're going to have to be thinking about this. And curricula should address topics such as democracy, globalization, and climate change. So I'll just pivot a little bit here to think about SDG 4 in connection to some of these reflections. And SDG 4, as you recall, is on how do we ensure inclusive, equitable, quality education, and how do we promote lifelong learning opportunities for all? And it's really important to kind of think about some key numbers in the educational process. So UN Women has reported that women make up more than 2/3 of the world's 796 million illiterate people. And 39% of rural girls attend secondary school. This is in comparison to 45% of rural boys and 59% urban girls and 60% of urban boys. So while progress has been made in reducing the gender gap in urban primary school enrollment, data from 42 countries shows that rural girls are twice as likely as urban girls to be out of school. So I'm thinking about the state of education, the state of the gender gap in education. UNESCO put together a report called Reimagining Our Futures Together to rethink about how do we reimagine education to meet the needs of the future. And they outlined a few major proposals. And one of them was, we really need a new social contract, new norms around education. And this would enhance the capacity of all actors within the educational sector to meet global challenges. So this new social contract for education would look at how do we repair injustices while transforming the future of education? How can these systems be grounded in human rights? And how can these educational systems be based on principles of non-discrimination, social justice, respect for life, human dignity, and cultural diversity? So we're going to be sharing a resource document later on that goes a little bit more detail about this report. But there were really two major outcomes of the Transforming Educational Summit, which was based on this report. And one was the launching of an international financing facility for education, which will be looking at unlocking funds, $10 billion in additional funding by 2030 for SDG 4. And another one was a youth declaration, in which young people really called for their inclusion in the policy design and implementation of educational systems. And there's more about the follow-up to the test, and this will be provided in the resource document that we'll be providing later on at the end of our conversation. So I will now turn it over to my co-facilitator.
Thank you. And thank you for giving us that broad overview of some of these really important principles and some directions for education. And I want to touch a little bit on the Secretary General's report on the Transforming Education Summit. And he highlighted 3 crises of education that I wanted to highlight here. And then I'll propose one pedagogy that might be able to address some of these things amongst a variety that could. So the first, Secretary General pointed out that education is experiencing a crisis of equality and equity. Millions of children and young people and adults are denied their right to education, which limits their potential to achieve other rights and freedoms. Second, education has a crisis of quality. Many children, including those who are enrolled in school, are not acquiring basic literacy skills. More fundamentally, education is going through a crisis of relevance. Education provided through contemporary systems is no longer fit for purpose. And in his Vision for Education statement, he expanded on that crisis of relevance, saying, young people and adults alike report that education does not equip them with knowledge, experience, skills, or values needed to thrive in a rapidly changing world. Learning continues to underplay skills, including problem solving, critical thinking, and empathy. Employers complain of major skills mismatch, while many adults are left with little or no access to affordable training and reskilling opportunities. Teachers are often poorly trained, undervalued, and underpaid, and are held back by outdated roles, methods, and tools of instruction. And so, although there are many wonderful tools out there, I would like to talk about project-based learning with you as a means to address some of these crises. Project-based learning is a teaching method in which students learn by actively engaging in real-world and personally meaningful projects. Project-based learning requires critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, and various forms of communication. To answer a driving question and create high quality work, students need to do much more than remember information. They need to use higher order thinking skills and to learn to work as a team. And Lily has been very kind to share on the screen the gold standard model of project-based learning that we use at my institution. And in this, students' learning experiences are centered around gaining key knowledge, gaining understanding of the course content, and developing skills for success in their later academic life, their work life, and beyond. It starts with posing a challenging problem or question that doesn't have a really clear-cut answer, like how do we address climate change? It requires sustained inquiry where students are working on the project for more than a day or even a week. Sometimes it's several weeks or several months. It's an authentic problem that matters to the community that they're in and has real-world implications. Students have voice and choice in the project. Maybe they get to choose what topic they're working on, or maybe they get to choose the solution they want to try. They reflect on their project and how it connects to their learning and to their community. They go through a process of critique and revision where their peers and maybe community members and the instructor give them feedback and they can improve the product that they're working on. And finally, they present that product publicly to members of the community or to their school or to their classmates as they learn through project-based learning. I'd like to propose that the project-based learning can address the crisis of relevance, and that means equipping students and teachers with those relevant skills. And project-based learning makes education relevant because it emphasizes those key workplace skills such as problem solving, critical thinking, and empathy. It provides critical connections with the community and employers to inform the learning process. And in the shared document, I have examples of projects that can address the crisis of relevance that you can look at when you have time. The crisis of quality can be addressed because students get to practice some of those basic literacy skills. They can practice reading, they can practice writing, they can practice communicating about what they're reading, and they can then focus on contributing that change within their communities. And then in terms of the crisis of equality, which is the access for all to the right of education, projects can be centered on that crisis and students can provide solutions for it specific to their communities on how to increase access to education, thus promoting youth leaders in the direction of transforming education. And then finally, project-based learning, provides an equitable education. And in this context, equitable education means that each child receives what they need to develop their full academic and social potential. And it uses 4 equity levers, which are knowledge of the students. So how can teachers learn about and build meaningful relationships with students? And we know that the best predictor of learning is that relationship with that teacher. Cognitive demand. How can we have high standards for the students while providing appropriate support for their growth? Literacy, it's embedded in everything. How can I provide experiences that deepen students' capacities to read, write, listen, and speak? And then shared power. How do we share that educational power with the students? We can do that through project-based learning.
Thank you so much, Jessie. And I like how you were able to connect many of the core principles of project-based learning to the crisis in education that were highlighted by the Secretary General on his vision statement on education. So just before we go into our breakout rooms, we just wanted to pause here to see if anybody has any questions about anything that I presented or anything that Jessie presented, or maybe you have reflections or thoughts before we break out and have go into our discussion. And feel free to use the raised hand function so we can see who would like to ask questions. Please, over to you, Debbie.
Yes, thank you very much, Lily and Jessie. For this preamble. I just would like to know if you have the documents you made reference to, and if Jessie has some, information that was awesome that you'll be sending us.
Yes, so we have, we're both working from a document that has all the talking points that we have used and links to the various reports and the projects that Dr. Jessie Hill mentioned. So that document is going to be made available to everybody to use. And also to add, we recognize that we we have individuals here who are also maybe thinking about education as well, or have written about education, or who have access to other resources. So we welcome everybody to be able to add to this document when we share it at the end.
Oh, there's a question. Oh,
Yes, please, over to you, Jessie, please. Go
I
ahead.
was going to say, I see a question in the chat, and I'm happy to represent the chat while you're moderating. And Carrie said, I was wondering what companies you both work for that are working towards these wonderful goals. I'm a student looking to change the education system myself. So Lily, would you like to answer first?
Sure. So I work with an organization called the Baha'i International Community. And so I can share the article where I based some of kind of the reading of the educational system. And really what the BIC tries to do is to distill the insights around the educational systems that Baha'is are participating in around the world. And these mostly are based around the education of children, of middle schoolers, and of adults. And so these are their curricula that have been developed that really work to supplement what individuals are learning within the school system. Because as has been mentioned, maybe when kids go to school, they're learning how to read and mathematics and so on. But these other qualities that parents also want their kids to learn about, respect and kindness and so on, are not necessarily being reinforced by the educational systems. So Baha'is all over the world work with different curricula that really supplement these educational systems.
And I work for Utah Valley University. I'm in the Innovation Academy, and I help develop and train instructors on high impact practices such as undergraduate research, project-based learning, study abroad, because we know that these high impact practices help students, particularly from underrepresented backgrounds, who struggle in the higher education system, because we hope to retain those folks, get them through to graduation so that they can benefit from a college education. There's another question in the chat that said, where did it go? I believe this is feasible. I think that meant project-based learning in certain areas and communities. Don't you think this might not be the case in other regions? And I think what's wonderful about project-based learning is that it can be contextualized, that it can be tailored to a particular region. It doesn't necessarily cost money. You can work with other organizations who maybe have money to provide funding for education for the students. So I think there may be challenges in some regions that other regions don't face, but I do think that it is feasible in all regions if it's tailored correctly to that local context. Oh, and here's a question by Valerie, and to jump on that, it would be great to understand if you work with corporations to change their internal culture, as learning is lifelong. Oh, I think that's a Lily question.
So I think there are definitely a number of Baha'i individuals in different corporate environments who are making efforts to bring in principles from the Ruhi Institute, which has developed these curricula that the Baha'is work with, to bring those into their organizations. I can't think of any particular case at the moment, but I do have one of my colleagues who's here with me, and maybe if we come up with some examples we can share. But the BIC itself as an organization definitely is intentional in extracting experiences and learned and insights from different communities all over the world, and we try to share those within the UN system to make sure that discourses here that are happening on education are benefiting from those insights.
And my particular organization, not my office within the organization, but the organization as a whole, does work with corporations and businesses nearby to embed educational opportunities for their workers at their place of work or at a location nearby, so that we can reskill and upskill the local workforce. So we do try to do that, even though that's not my particular role. I know a little bit about. Oh, here's a question in the chat from Tanya. Learning through inquiry and purposeful application is wonderful, and I really like the proposal. Can I please clarify how the leadership skills are planned and encouraged through the model so that girls are practicing leading and confidence at that stage and get ready to lead at work too? So I think that's a fabulous question, and it will always depend on the instructor. You can build any leadership skill you want into project-based learning. So for example, if my public product is just presenting in a classroom, that might not develop those leadership skills. So I might want to level that up and say, we're not going to just present to our classroom. I want to take my class to the city council, and I want them to present at the city council, or I want them to learn about leadership in government. So my partner is going to be the city council, and I'm going to make sure that those girls work with the city council throughout their project to see how they can make a difference in their community. It's all about the flavor, metaphorically, the spin you take on how you implement your project-based learning. Oh, we're getting a couple more comments. We can probably take maybe 2 or 3 more, Lily, do you think? Yeah. So Pamela says in the chat, I work with graduate students at Metropolitan College, and we have a long-standing methodology of what you're referring to as project-based learning, which we call constructive action and purpose-centered learning. Ooh, I love that. The bigger issue is helping institutions that have these methodologies survive and thrive. Our methods grew out of working with women on welfare. Pamela, I would love it if you would share that, the link to your organization in the chat and in our shared document. Oh, and forgive me, I believe it's Breda. If I have pronounced that incorrectly, I apologize. What would you say to corporate education, and then in parentheses, language training, international education companies, etc., organizations focused on profit over quality of education? Would love to hear perspectives on enacting change in these spaces. Lily, that almost sounds like a challenge to our entire group.
Sorry, I was looking at the Zoom logistics with Devin.
Oh, yes. It's a question about, and if you don't mind, do we have enough time, do you think, to open it up to the group? Rita is asking a question about how can we maybe work with corporate organizations, corporate education organizations that are focused on profit over quality of education to maybe change their perspectives and work on quality over profit.
Yeah, it'd be great to hear from everybody on their thoughts on that.
Oh, there's some things going on in the chat. I'm not sure anything directly addressed that in the chat, but would anyone like to say anything to that question?
Sorry, can the question come again, please?
Sure. Bretta was asking, what would you say to corporate education organizations focused on profit over quality of education? How can we maybe work with them to transform their perspective? How could we discuss this with them?
So it looks like Mark has his hand raised. Maybe we can hear from Mark, and then I don't know if Mr. Dubé wants to come in after that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate how how active the chat is and just all of the thoughts being shared there. And I think this is an interesting question. The first thing that came to my mind is I wonder if maybe part of the response or a response is actually starting upstream from where the question starts. If you've got organizations that are already valuing profit over quality, like, I don't know how often we will be successful in actually changing their mind, maybe, and maybe there is value to that. But it seems to me part of addressing that is maybe a wider sort of discourse or exploration among, society at large, or the sort of education adjacent institutions about sort of what is the role of education in society, what purposes do we want it to serve, what objectives do we collectively value. And I think the clearer that is, the less often we'll have organizations that are saying we'd rather make money than give people a decent education.
Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing that. And I see that Jules and Maria Ekaterina also have their hands raised, so maybe go over to Jules.
Hello, my name is Jules. I am from Colombia. I am a psychologist and I have worked with facilitation for a long time. One of the things that I have found that I have been a teacher as well in 40 years, 10-year-old kids. And one of the things that I have found out learning a lot about trauma and how transgenerational trauma has affected our country, and one of the things that we can find in different kids is that the trauma that they are living, or the trauma that they are inheriting from their parents and grandparents, is affecting the quality of the capacity that they have to learn new things. And as I have been working and learning a lot about trauma and the neuroscience of trauma, and one of the things that is very important is that we work towards working with the body. And most of the the educational systems that I have known, we focus on the minds and we forget that the minds are in the body. So we sit, especially young students, in chairs, and it doesn't matter the structure that we have and the aim that we have. Even values, we try to teach them from the mind, not from the experience in the body. So I think that one of the things that we have to aim towards changing in education is working and integrating how the mind is in the body and how we need to learn empathy and emotional tools from learning more about mindfulness, and not mindfulness from the meditation practices, but being aware of our bodies and our experiences, emotional experiences, and how those are always in the learning process. So that's what I wanted to raise. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jules. So it was a little bit hard to hear, but I heard something about mindfulness as well, and how to kind of include those practices in education. I just want to invite everybody to be conscious that we have quite a large group. So just to kind of be brief in your remarks, and we also want to go into our breakout rooms soon. So maybe with those who have their hands raised, we can invite those individuals to take the floor. I see that Mr. Dubé, he had raised his hand before you, Maria Katerina, so maybe we'll go over to Mr. Dubé, and then we'll take Maria Katerina and Rachel. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm Ibon Nkosi Tube, the LWF Gender Justice Advocate Delegate. I'm excited to hear these are wonderful conversations. So my speaking here is around to answer the question that was dropped in the chat box. So, well, we have different corporates in the spaces. Some enter in this field with an intention to raise money, and some to help the community. But I want to applaud those who enter to help the community. But those who are for profit in these spaces, I want to believe as the young people, we are game changers of tomorrow. Let us start the run today to encourage those whom we know that are entering into these spaces for the sake of money. This is something to help the community. Let us encourage one another and not to fight, but precisely encourage one another that when we enter in these spaces, let's have the mind of helping the community, not to take the money from the community. So that's my submissions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dubé, and for really highlighting the key importance of serving communities. Over to you, Maria Katerina.
Thank you for giving me the floor. So I have a more realistic approach. I'm coming from an academic environment and I finished high-level education. And we all know that for very good faculties, you have to pay a lot of money to attend. So seeing this fight between profit versus quality, I cannot help but wonder who will pay so much money for some education that is not high quality. I think that we have a problem that practically solved itself. Because if you want, as a company that sells education to make profit, you have to provide quality education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria Katerina. Over to you, Rachel.
Hello, and thank you for giving me the floor as well. I worked with a company that provided language training, different languages, English, Spanish, French, Portuguese, Italian. And one of the things that they ensured that the quality of education was there. We provided customized language services, so it was all one-on-one. The director would invite clients to sit down. They would actually fill out a form to see, what was it that they needed the language for what purpose, for work or general conversation. So they ensured that the training was high quality, and periodically, quarterly, we would actually do assessments. So we were ensured that we were meeting the client's needs, and it allowed us, even when we did, for example, curriculum development, that we were keeping the client's needs and their levels and their perspective in mind. So I just want to say, yeah, we definitely did not sacrifice the quality of education. Had the client provide feedback at the end of their quarterly assessment so that, we knew if we were on track or, what we should improve upon.
Thank you for sharing that. So we'll now hand the floor back over to Jessie, and maybe just a quick announcement to everybody. It seems that most individuals in the Zoom are English speakers, so we'll be mostly going to English speaking groups.
Okay, thank you, Lily, and thank you for everybody and your insightful comments, both vocally and in the chat. I'm here to introduce what we're doing in our breakout session. So first I will show you before I share you the links so that we can follow along with the same steps. I'm going to share my screen for just a moment. Okay, so we have created a shared Google Slides set, and we want everybody to work in it at the same time. We have general instructions on the second slide, which essentially says go to your breakout room and find the slide that matches your number. So if you were breakout room number 10, you can sort of click around and find, oh, here is room number 10. Each slide has a set of questions, and in the notes area, there is a set of instructions and definitions. So we want to make sure that you read these instructions and definitions before you start. And then you can work together in your breakout room. We've given you a sort of estimated time. So please spend about 10 minutes on the first 2 questions. We'll spend about 20 minutes on these following 3 questions. And then when we come back to discuss as a big group, we're going to discuss only a subset of these questions when we come back together. So make sure there's somebody from your group who's ready to share out on what you discuss. So can I ask if anyone has questions before I share the link to the Google Slides set? Do you understand sort of what we're doing in this section? I cannot see the chat while I'm hunting for the link. There we go. Okay, seeing none, I will put the link in the chat so that everybody can have access. If everybody could just maybe click on that so I can see if everybody's getting in there okay, that would be good. Oh, people are popping in. Wonderful. You should all be able to edit as well. So hopefully that'll work out. And then Devin, I think at this point we are ready to send folks to breakout rooms of about 5 each.
All right, so I'm gonna open the rooms. It will automatically, excuse me, it will automatically send you to your room. So you don't have to worry about clicking join or figuring it out. You'll go right there. So I will open the rooms. You'll be automatically sent and enjoy your conversations. Yes.
So Devin, I think we can stop recording at this point since we've done.
Yes.
And then what